Before I get into the main section of this video, where I give you an overview of all the characters in the game, I want to say that you should probably give every character a try. That's not to say you should go and try to master all of them, but even if you didn't like a certain archetype or playstyle in one game, you might end up liking it in Jujutsu Shenanigans. So just trying out a character is a great way to know if you like them or not. Putting that aside, this video will talk about every character in Jujutsu Shenanigans, their general role and playstyle, and how you can decide which character to play. Before we get into the video though, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more helpful guides and information on Jujutsu Shenanigans. Now, let's get into the video. Starting off this character overview is Gojo. Gojo is generally a good beginner character if you're new to the game. He has a good mix of range and close quarters attacks, so whatever playstyle you apply to him is really your own decision, and his combos aren't too complex compared to some other characters, only really requiring you to string together your moves without that much complicated tech in between. He's great if you're new to the game and still figuring out how you want to play, because you can use him aggressively, passively, or passive-aggressively, and it'll still work. He's a jack of all trades in a sense, and this also works with pro players too, and isn't limited to newer ones. His skill 4 isn't too high, since he can generally get by at low levels of play to just string together combos and spamming out moves while playing passive, but he also has a decently high skill ceiling, since at higher levels of play, you need to innovate against people who know how to deal with that playstyle. Meaning that there's a lot to learn with Gojo, not too much you need to learn to have fun with him. If you're good at the game, you can switch between playstyles depending on the situation, and use each move whenever they're needed to win a fight. If you don't like one specific kind of playstyle, or just don't know what you're doing yet, Gojo is for you. Yuji, on the other hand, is far more defined in the role he plays, which is pure, unyielding aggression. Yuji is the most up-in-your-face character in the entire game, with the best mobility of the roster because of the crushing blow cancel, and a lot of great moves for winning close-range interactions like both variants of Cursed Strikes. He also has a lot of guard breaks in his moveset, and a counter that basically acts as a get-out-of-jail-free card, or an instant gap closer to range projectiles, to make him even more annoying to fight against. Yuji has a higher skill floor than most characters in the game, so I don't exactly recommend him to beginners, but he's a lot of fun to play. His feinting gimmick also lets him pull off some crazy mix-ups that can bait out counters or make people respond to moves in the wrong way. And even though it's a gimmick that you need a lot of skill to use effectively, it's still really good in the right hands. Yuji is made for people who like playing rushdown glass cannon characters, so if that's your general playstyle, go ahead and use him. Hakari is basic. It sounds wrong to call him that, but it's sort of the truth. Hakari's moveset is nothing complicated when it comes to winning neutral engagements. You have reserve balls, which is a very bad zoning tool that's usually only used to hit people on the ground in combos for extra damage, plus Rough Energy and Fever Breaker, which are both usually reserved for combos and not much else. Your only moves that are decent in neutral are Shutter Doors, because it's a ranged auto-lock on combo starter, and your counter, which only does a counter on melee hits and isn't all too amazing. However, despite me saying that Hakari is basic, that doesn't mean he's bad at all. Hakari's stats are really good, and he can do a lot of consistent damage with combo after combo because of his incredibly short cooldowns and overall decent stats. However, unlike the other characters which have a lot of moves they can apply to neutral, like Yuji's Crushing Blow or Gojo's Lapse Blue, you don't really have that as Hakari, so you have to fill in those gaps with the basic mechanics like M1s, forward dashes, side dashes, block bypasses, and all the basic things out there. If you aren't reliant on your moves to win a game, which you shouldn't ever be, then Hakari can be very annoying to fight and delete people's health bars because he can fire off one combo after another due to his low cooldowns. He also isn't hard to pick up at all because his combos aren't all that complicated and his neutral game isn't too gimmicky. I consider Gojo the better beginner character because he has a versatile moveset, but Hakari isn't bad either, though he definitely focuses on a more rushdown type playstyle since he needs to get in close to deal meaningful damage. If I would recommend him to anyone, I'd say Hakari is great for people who are experienced with Battleground games and understand the mechanics, but are new to Jujutsu Shenanigans specifically, or to people who have already picked up the base game and want to try out a more aggressive kind of character. Hakari is not a hard character to use, but however good he is in your hands depends a lot on how good you are. Megumi is not a beginner character. If you're watching this video because you're new to the game and want to know what character to start with, don't pick Megumi. Megumi is by far the most gimmicky character in the entire game, and his playstyle is completely different from Yuji, Gojo, Hakari, and Mahito, who can all sort of play in the rushdown style. Megumi focuses a lot on creating the distance needed to use his moves, and then combining those moves with other moves to get even more value out of them. I won't go over all the synergies that Megumi's moves have, but each one of them serves many different roles for different scenarios. For example, Toad is good as a combo extender after a down slam or uppercut, but you can use it for grabbing people in neutral who are off guard, and use a hyper armor to sort of turn it into a counter. Niue, on the other hand, can act as a rushdown tool, a running away tool, a simple damage add-on in a combo after a ragdoll, or a way to combo into Toad. Don't even get me started on Divine Dogs, which is a move that has way more to it than what's on the surface. Megumi can be simplified into the role of a zoner, but really, the way he plays is kind of its own thing, and you have to go and learn how each of his moves can be applied in neutral if you want to play him effectively. Megumi's playstyle revolves around overwhelming people with range attacks and whittling them down with combos while dominating the neutral game with all of your moves. He's a character that's really interesting, but if you're new to the game, I'd say keep away. I only really recommend him to people who have already played zoners and actually like that archetype, or to people who have gotten a lot of experience with one character and want to try something new now that they've gotten more accustomed to the game. He is not for beginners. Mahito is the final character so far, and he's a little hard to fully explain in terms of how his playstyle works. Mahito is a bit of a complicated character that has a lot of different tools in his arsenal, all of which can work for a different purpose, but he's way more focused on an aggressive playstyle than Megumi, and his moves don't need to be chained together like Megumi does. In terms of how he plays, he sort of falls in between a mix of Yuji and Gojo, with Mahito kind of being an all-rounder with his range and close range moves, similar to Gojo, but with a heavier emphasis on aggressive, in-your-face play, since his moves are primarily designed for gap closing or comboing, though he doesn't fully lean into the playstyle like Yuji does. He's great at attacking people on wake up, and he can chain together his moves for nasty combos, on top of having an overall decent damage output. Mahito's skill floor is a little higher than most characters, since he has a lot of different moves that you need to constantly chain together to deal damage, but he's not completely detached from other characters in terms of playstyle like Megumi is, so your experience when playing something like Hakari will sort of carry over in a sense. He's a really strong character, just requires some quick thinking and a bit more practice than others to use, especially with his gimmick that changes his forward dash. So, with that, I've explained every character in the game and who they're best suited for. However, take into note that all of this is theoretical, and while you can sort of look at the elements of a character to decide who will like it, there's always going to be exceptions. You might have hated playing Virtue in Black Magic 2, but you might end up loving Megumi. What you like is really just up to you to decide, so while this video will help out a little, trying out characters is the best way to figure it out. With that, this marks the end of the video. If you found it helpful, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel for even more Jujutsu Shenanigans content, and I'll see you next time in another video. I'm Eternally, and have a good day. Bye.